It's time to take a day off. It's Doctor Who Sunday. Hello and welcome back to Chat About It, Don't Shout About It with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Woke, as crowned by one of my haters.
I crown you Queen of the Woke!
Let's chat about it. Please do keep it friendly in the chat. Please do let me know what you think of the Sea Devils in the comments section below. What's your favourite part? How did you react when you first saw the Sea Devils? What do you think of its conclusion? Today we're reviewing the Sea Devils, just in case you didn't guess. The Sea Devils was voted by you, the subscriber, to vote on the current poll. Please head on over to the post page after this video has finished where you can find it. The Sea Devils was written by Malcolm Hulke. The Doctor and Jo go to visit the Master, who is imprisoned. The Doctor is interested in the Master's whereabouts for his TARDIS. Whilst the Doctor clocks that there's something else going on because sheeps keep going missing. The Doctor decides that he's going to investigate with Jo. The Doctor ends up in a naval base after he's captured. He is trying to convince Captain Hark to work with him. Captain Hark ends up working with him once it is proven that they are from UNIT. Whilst investigating, the Doctor discovers that the Master is trying to bring the Sea Devils up to service so they can take back the land that was once theirs. However, the Doctor suggests that this would not work, and perhaps the Sea Devils and the humans could live side by side in peace and the Sea Devils have the run of the sea and the water, and the humans had the run of the land. Plans for reconciliation go amiss, and the government tries to intervene. They send in naval ships to destroy the Sea Devils. It doesn't work, and it results in a massive battle between the Sea Devils and the humans. The Doctor has to resolve the entire situation by sabotaging the Sea Devils, even though he didn't want to. The story culminates in the Master escaping, and it's left on a cliffhanger. I love it in classic when stories end like this in the Sea Devils. That type of cliffhanger. I like that type of cliffhanger, where something leaves you completely hanging and it's not resolved in the next story. There was always that question of what happened to the Master before the Sea Devils. We know that he's imprisoned, but we didn't know where he was imprisoned. Quite often the Master stories do end that way. The Master escapes on the hovercraft after hypnotizing someone else to go on the stretcher, and that was a brilliant idea. And I think this one was really starting to play in the fact that the Master was going to be the master of disguises. It was very clear at this point that the Master was going to be the main adversary for the Doctor as well, so why not leave it on a cliffhanger like that? I think it was a very good idea. I say the main adversary. I think it's probably better to say a main adversary. Now, believe it or not, the Sea Devils is not a favourite story of mine. I don't have many negatives about it. I just don't rate it. It's not up there. The Sea Devils themselves are not necessarily a monster that I was scared of. That still lies with the Autons. I like the design. I find that design very classic. The costume is simple as well, and I like everything about the concept and how they are presented. I think my biggest issue with this story is the fact that it's bulked out, and it's it's bulked out by a big fight. Let's just put it like that. Ironically, a war between the land and the sea. I never thought I would say that. I prefer Doctor Who in 4 parts as opposed to perhaps 6 or more. This is a 6-part story, and I quite often find that with 6-part stories that perhaps there's some pretty big gaps to fill. So Malcolm Hulke would have been commissioned to perhaps do the 6 parts or 6 gaps to fill. So he could have done a 4-parter plus a 2-parter, which wasn't really common back then, or do 2 3-part stories. However, in true Malcolm style, he went with the 6. I find this story quite slow in places. Now, I don't watch the parts back to back. I can't sit there and do that, and I know that it was never designed to be like that anyway. However, I do get conscious of the fact that the story is quite long. That doesn't make it a bad story, by the way. It's just an observation, and I'm very well aware that I was not born in the 60s or the 70s, and I wouldn't remember any of the 80s. TV was very different back then. Still, with part 5 and part 6, I feel like a lot of that was bulking out with the story. It was padding. Having said that, that padding visually was great. I do feel like could have been moved to an earlier point in the story, but it is what it is, and I know and I understand that this is an extremely popular story. Ironically, it's probably the John Pertwee story that I've seen the most, even though it's not my favourite. Anyway, with part five and what part five and part six allowed for is to show that it truly did work. They truly did work with the Navy. There was a lot of attention to detail. There was a lot of location filming for this story. You've got them coming in and out on a hovercraft on several occasions. We've got ships. They're blowing things up in the water. You've got them using sonar and plotting courses. All these things that can be related to the Navy. It was something that is very evidently well thought out, and that just need a lot of praise. This story really could not have been that cheap to do either. I don't think so. And of course, with a situation like this, you've got the government also wading in very strong headed, which I quite like actually. I find that something very common with stories written by Malcolm Hulke for Doctor Who. He was very good at integrating a message into the story extremely naturally. One thing that I do like about the concept of the Sea Devils, and I'm talking about the creatures here, not the story itself, is the fact that they existed on Earth before the humans did, much like the dinosaurs did, and then, of course, they go into hibernation and left the man to evolve. But I think it plays into someone's fear of the fact that there could be monsters in the sea. Quite often we hear stories about the kraken and kelpies and things like that. So why couldn't there be some sort of intelligent life form that thinks for itself that can live below in the water and on the land? How they are introduced as well. The first part starts off with action. We just see a reveal of a hand. Malcolm Hulke wastes no time in introducing the fear factor. Of course, with the stories that where you have the name of the villain or the monster in the title, you might as well introduce them as quickly as you can, because we already know that's what we're going to get, so it's not going to be a surprise. The surprise in this case would have been the master, I suppose. What did people think of the Sea Devil reveal at the end of part one? Now, I loved it personally. I'm not scared of the Sea Devils either. I find them more thrilling than anything, which is quite common for me throughout a lot of Doctor Who. But I did love it. Just really quickly as well, I want to go back to cliffhangers, because I think really the first part and the last part have the best cliffhangers of the story. But the cliffhanger at the end of part one is heavy breathing and something coming towards the Doctor and Jo. We're led to believe that it's going to be the creature that we just saw, which was the Sea Devil. But then in part two, they reveal that it wasn't the Sea Devil at all. That in itself is a very good cliffhanger. I will admit that. What would have been even better, and this may just be me being a bit picky, is having the Sea Devil cut through the door and the hand coming through. That would have been a much better cliffhanger. However, I think the resolution to part one's cliffhanger is supposed to lead you into a false sense of security. So maybe that's the reason why it was done that way. And then we've got the Sea Devil coming out of the sea, and then it zooms in on the Doctor's face. That one was at the end of part three. And then at the end of part four, the Doctor goes missing, and we find out in part five that he's been taken by the Sea Devils. And I think at that point, I was thinking, gosh, about time that he got captured by the Sea Devils. I think that we get, what, a 5-minute wait, maybe, to find out what happened to the Doctor, which is good, because I find in this story that there are some very quick resolutions to the cliffhangers that we were given. So, for example, at the end of part two, the Master throws a dagger at the Doctor's back. Now, the torment for that at the time would have been quite exciting in many respects, but then it resolves itself very quickly. It showed that the Doctor had missed the Doctor and it hit the door, or the door frame instead. It's nowhere near the level of quickness that we get with today's stories, just to be fair, with the resolution to the cliffhanger. It's just an observation that I made. In the style of John Pertwee, though, we of course get a fight, and a sword fight at that. Now, I find this quite entertaining, because the sword fight in itself, well, that was random, wasn't it? It comes out of the blue. So I think that Malcolm Hulke was trying to do something that was a little bit different with the fighting for John Pertwee. And I also like the fact that naturally, of course, the Doctor is arrested for attacking the Master, even though it was the Master that pulled the gun on him in the first place. but it's all part of the Master's cunning plan, isn't it? I think that Malcolm also brings a very light-hearted tone to part two. We have a sword fight, which is obviously light-hearted. The Doctor eats a sandwich randomly during that fight. And before that, the Doctor is playing golf blindfolded. And I think the funniest part in part two is where the Doctor is looking at the transmitter that he has created at the fortress, and he says, "If I may say so myself, that's a remarkable piece of work." And then the transmitter blows up in his hands. He looks really miffed. I love John Pertwee's reaction. Now, what gets the Doctor there at this point is because he comes face to the face with the Sea Devils. He's has reason to believe that the Sea Devils that they were sinking the ship. The Sea Devils made me think of the Japanese ghosts that sink ships. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but I don't think they were based on that, just so you know. However, if they were, that's a pretty cool concept to bring to screen. No one wants to be on a sinking ship, so the idea that ships are sinking on a regular basis because of some unknown cause is a really good one. And it all centers around the fortress. The two at the beginning have quote unquote disappeared. Ships are going missing, and the Master, who is unable to hypnotize people at his lockup, apparently, which I found very intriguing, is the one that wants to contact the Sea Devils because with his help they could rule the planet again, which naturally, of course, the Doctor wholeheartedly disagrees with, as he should. I think that the design and the premise for this story plays both into the Master and the Doctor. The Master wants one thing, the Doctor opposes it and says it needs to be the other. The Master doesn't like the planet Earth, he doesn't like the human beings, but the Doctor adores planet Earth and he likes the human beings. They are at loggerheads, but this story shows off the intelligence of the two Time Lords who want very different things. I think the way that the two actors handle this is very sublime. Roger Delgado is a very suave Master. I do like him as the Master, very much so. And the way that he handles this story is with such eloquence and ease. He plays it like he's been cooking up this plan for a very long time as himself, even though it's very clear that it is a portrayal of the Master, but it's like he's been doing it whilst he's been practicing and learning his lines. And obviously, the Master does plan for a long time. We know that. It's something that is very well within the realms of the Master, taking advantage of a situation like is happening in the Sea Devils. I think my favourite part is where in part 3, Jo and the Doctor escape at the Master's request. He allows them to get to, where was it? The beach, get there in the end, because he uses the device to summon the Sea Devils, the device that he's been making from the sea. The reveal of the Sea Devils coming out is fabulous, but, sorry, just love Craig over Howard. But what I like even more is the Doctor throwing himself onto the barbed wire. The Doctor's priority is and always will be his companion, especially with the John Pertwee Doctor. Now, this is shocking what I'm just about to say, so please hold on to your seats and please don't pass out. I finally have a compliment about the sonic screwdriver. First of all, he only uses it 3 times in this entire story. In classic, they don't use it all that much anyway. But second of all, the sonic is used as a mine detector and it explodes the mines. Now, the sonic screwdriver exploding the mines is something that isn't surprising. Wasn't surprised about that. That's a very common way of using the sonic screwdriver, particularly in this day and age. What surprised me, though, and what I liked more, was the fact that the sonic was used as a mine detector. That I liked. I don't think we'll ever see something as simple like that again with the sonic, but I think it's definitely one of the more creative ways to use a sonic. Anyway, well, nowadays they just use the sonic for whatever they want. What I will say, and I suppose this is a bit of a negative here, is that using the sonic to explode something sets it up for the premise of today's stuff. The creativity has been done today for the writers who are writing with the sonic screwdriver, as was when the Doctor used the sonic screwdriver to escape and open the door where he and the Master were trapped in part 6. They use that now as a constant thing. Now, you've all recovered from the shock, or at least I hope you have. Let's go back to the review. Malcolm really honed in on the fact that the Sea Devils were sea creatures and there were numerous shots of the Sea Devils that were rising up out of the sea. First of all, That must have been absolutely freezing in English Channel waters. But secondly, it plays into people's fear, even more so that the fear I was talking about earlier. One of the impressions that I always get with Malcolm's writing is even if it's going to have something political in it and integrated naturally, or he's going to go down the route of fear. And then there are times when he puts the two together. And I think that's definitely something that he's doing in this story. He also really likes a battle. In this case, the battle being between the sea and the land. Oh, God's sake. I did it again. Although I can assure you that my expectations with the upcoming series versus the Sea Devils is very low. All right. It's just ironic that those two comparisons are side by side. Okay. It's like I just can't avoid it. The Doctor in part 5 shows you the ideal. You can't deny it, that the battle between the land and the sea, oh, for goodness sake, is an allegory for real life and things that happen in the past for real, in present for real, in the future for real. The result is something that someone wants to claim, and we end up fighting over it. Malcolm does it in a way where he presents as a story, so if it does go over your head, that's absolutely okay. The Master is the representation of the corrupt, and the Doctor is the representation of the peacemaker. The Sea Devils are the representation of they are prepared to fight, but they are also willing to negotiate at the same time. All are reflective of what happens in real life. Malcolm Hulke is very much able to integrate something like that into a story very eloquently. Something which, if he were alive today, he would be able to teach the current writers. But the premise of part 5, I like that word today. I really do like, even though I find that it's a bit of padding, really. The Doctor being taken by the Sea Devils has finally happened. Yay! But we finally get to hear the Sea Devils speak, and I think we did wait a little bit too long for that. But when they do, and we find out what they want, and we hear it from their own mouths, so to speak, it has a much more dramatic effect and intent as opposed to just hearing it from the Master, and their voices are actually pretty creepy as well. Unfortunately, those talks do not go according to plan with the Doctor, and the Doctor then manages to reconnect with the Navy, and at the end of that part, it results in the Sea Devil pointing a gun at the Doctor's face. And in true Jon Pertwee style, he has a pretty cool scrap with them, but ends up unconscious. And Jon Pertwee's faces when he's doing these types of fights with these aliens, they make me chuckle. I do find it quite dramatic, though. In part 6 in itself, it's very dramatic, I will say. The Sea Devils have some extremely dramatic deaths. They flip over, they do dives, they fall over each other. It's like you just got a whole entire stunt crew and they said, just die however you want. But I do like it. It's fun. It adds a bit of, like, I don't know, campiness, I guess you could say, to it. I made a lot of notes this time about the sound as well. I don't often comment all that much on the sound for Classic Who, because I do try to keep in mind that it is a different time period compared to what we have today, and sound has really come a long way since then. A lot of the sound effects I do like. It has a very 70s, 80s tone to them. That's fine. And I like the concept of the Doctor stunning the Sea Devils with the high frequency sound in order to escape. However, that high frequency sound, even for me, was too loud, and it went on for a long time. I think it could have been a bit shorter. It did start to grate on me after a little bit. I think I've watched this story probably about 10 times now, maybe more, and it's been the same reaction every time for me. Having said that, I do like the fact that it was focused on one device that would finish it all rather than having the story fly around in all sorts of different directions. It all comes back to the device that the Master had created, so it remained consistent and we saw it all the way throughout. I also wrote down in my notes, good old ventilation shafts in Doctor Who. Yeah, that's a note I had. But I think in this case, it was desperately needed because I think Joe Jo wasn't used all that much in this particular story. One thing that I was thinking about throughout when I was analysing this was that Jo really does not have that much to do. I just said the same thing twice pretty much, but I am adamant of that. I genuinely don't think she was used enough. She did her normal thing. She was there to ask questions. That was required of her, and I think that her helping the Doctor to escape, and after she escapes her would-be captors, was a really cool bit. She was able to communicate to the Doctor, distract the guards and things like that, and therefore she was able to infiltrate and help the Doctor escape. But other than that, she don't really do all that much. Oh, wait, she also hands over the unit passes at the naval bases, so she does do that, and she complains that the Doctor eats her sandwich. I like it when the companions have more to do, because the companions, in the eyes of the viewer, are the eyes to the TARDIS. We see the Doctor Who's story through their eyes in many respects, because in most cases, they are human, we are human, so we are able to relate. At least that's what I believe. One thing that does come through in the story is the fact that Jon Pertwee really is a petrolhead, or was a petrolhead. I mean that in the nicest possible way. He's riding speedboats, driving cars, doing whatever. He loves motors, clearly. You can tell that. And that was something that he brought forward into his version of the Doctor, in addition to being the Caped Crusader. I like the petrolhead aspect more than his Doctor being the combat fighting man that he is. However, one thing that I do admire about the Pertwee Doctor, and this is going to tie into stuff that we have heard recently, is that he doesn't seem to be older. He wasn't afraid to run around and put that into his character. He was very keen on doing his own stunts and his own fights. I'm not aware of any complaints physicality-wise that Jon Pertwee had made, unlike what we get today. So whilst The Sea Devils isn't my favourite story overall, that still sits with Enlightenment. I am able to admire what it was trying to do as a Doctor Who story. It has its weaknesses, but I think it has its strengths more than its weaknesses. That's what I think. Now it's time to find out what you all think. So the first two comments that I'm going to read to you sum up what I've just said perfectly in one sentence each, what I have tried to say. And I wouldn't have been able to do it this way because it wouldn't have made for a very interesting video. So, you know, my reviews, 20 to 30 minutes, that's what I tried to go for. Anyway, Horror Stew says, memorable, thought-provoking at the time, campy and enjoyable. And Anonymous Nightcall Guy, that's a cool name, classic, a bit too long, but very good. And I completely agree with those statements. I do agree with those. Now, Vin Weasel says this. I was never into them. All that zigga and what I really, really want, bleep, and those stupid pumps they wore. Oh, hang on, that's the Spice Girls. Okay. The Sea Devils were pretty good, rock solid storytelling, which is what Who should be about. I do agree with that. But they never scared me as much as the Spice Girls. I remember being terrified they were going to make another film. Now, Vin Weasel and I might just be about to fall out about the Spice Girls here, okay? Or we can agree to disagree. I think that one might be better. Spice Girls rule, okay? Although I will agree with the fact that one movie more, that would have just been, well, no. One movie was more than enough. I do agree, though, that the storytelling is pretty good. I like that comment a lot, and we can agree to disagree on the Spice Girls here. Dale Roberts says, one of my favourite all-time Pertwee stories, along with the Silurians. Yes, I realise the Sea Devils is a virtual remake of the Silurians. No, I didn't go into that. But, yes. Both are among my favourite Who monsters, and designs are classics, plus both stories make a great double bill. If I had to compare the Sea Devils to the Silurians, I much prefer the Sea Devils. I'm almost dreading the day when Warriors of the Deep wins the vote. I really am. Well, anyway, on that note, that's what I think. Let me know what you think. Please do check out some of the other content that I've picked out for you. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. at 4 p.m. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching today. Don't forget you can join me on my other platforms as well. I've got YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, X, TikTok, Instagram, Locals, Substack, and I also have a Discord. Everything is linked below.